The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders and terrors alike, yet among all the mysteries that existed, none were as strange as the silent rule every alien species followed: never step aboard a human ship. It wasn't an official law, nor was it enforced by any governing body, but the fear ran deep within every race. Stories passed from one species to another, whispers of something unnatural lurking within the metal hulls of human vessels. Even those who had never seen a human warship in person felt a shiver at the thought of entering one. No one could say exactly why, but the fear was universal. No alien ever set foot inside a human spacecraft willingly. K. Wraith of the Exovani High Order had always been a rational being. He believed in logic, facts, and first-hand experience. As a diplomat, he prided himself on his ability to remain calm under pressure, to see through fear and deception. When the Council assigned him to negotiate a critical treaty with humanity, he had accepted without hesitation. However, his confidence wavered the moment he learned the arrangement they insisted he travel aboard a human warship. The UNS Deliverance was the only vessel capable of reaching the negotiation site in time. There were no other options. For the first time in his life, K. Wraith felt uncertainty claw at his mind. The warnings from his fellow diplomats echoed in his ears. "Refuse the mission," they had said. "No alien ever returns the same after boarding a human ship." Yet, the opportunity to forge an alliance with the most formidable species in the galaxy was too important to ignore. When the day of departure arrived, K. Wraith stood at the docking bay, staring at the massive structure before him. The UNS Deliverance was unlike any vessel he had ever seen. Alien ships were smooth, elegant, designed for efficiency and comfort. Human ships were different, scarred, battle-worn, as if they had survived countless wars and emerged stronger. The hull was lined with strange marks, long scratches that didn't seem mechanical. It was as if something had tried to claw its way out of the ship. Wraith shook off the thought and stepped inside, his heart pounding slightly faster than he liked to admit. The interior was cold, metallic, and strangely oppressive. The walls bore dents, not from impact, but from something else, something that had struggled against them. The air felt heavier, filled with a presence he couldn't define. Humans walked the corridors, their expressions calm, their demeanor professional, but there was something in their eyes. A weight. A knowledge they carried but never spoke of. The ship's captain, a stern-looking man named Commander Graves, greeted him with a polite nod. "Welcome aboard, Ambassador K. Wraith. I hope your journey will be comfortable." His words were courteous, but his tone carried an unspoken message. "You are not ready for what you will experience here." As the ship left the station, K. Wraith felt it again, that strange, oppressive presence. The corridors seemed darker than they should be. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and distant sounds echoed through the walls' whispers, faint but undeniable. He turned quickly, expecting to see someone behind him, but there was nothing. He convinced himself it was his imagination. The mind played tricks in unfamiliar environments. That was all. But the humans knew. He could see it in their behavior. They walked with purpose but never lingered too long in one place. They avoided certain areas, never looking too deeply into the darkness of an unlit corridor. When he asked about it, they simply smiled, a knowing yet unreadable smile, and changed the subject. On the third night, K. Wraith experienced the truth. He had been walking through the lower decks, studying the design of the ship, when he saw movement at the far end of the hallway. A crew member was walking, but behind him, something followed. It was not human. A shadow, shifting, flickering, moving in unnatural ways. Wraith's blood ran cold. He blinked, and it was gone. The crew member turned the corner as if nothing had happened. Trembling, K. Wraith rushed forward, his mind racing. When he reached the intersection, the hallway was empty. He was alone. But the cold sensation remained, pressing against him like unseen eyes watching from the void. The next day, he confronted Commander Graves. "What is on this ship?" Wraith demanded, his voice sharper than intended. The human captain studied him for a long moment before answering. "Memories," he said simply. "Echoes of those who died aboard." Wraith's mind recoiled at the words. Ghosts. The idea was absurd. No rational species in the galaxy believed in such things. Yet, standing in the dimly lit room, with the cold sensation creeping up his spine, he couldn't deny what he had seen. "They do not harm us," Graves continued. "They were part of us once. They still are." The realization hit K. Wraith like a physical blow. Humans did not fear death. They carried it with them. While other species mourned and moved on, humans kept their dead close. Their warships were not just vessels, they were tombs, filled with the lingering presence of those who had fallen in battle. And somehow, in a way no one could explain, those souls remain. Watching. Protecting. The ship was never truly empty. Kraith shuddered as he finally understood why no alien ever boarded a human vessel twice. It wasn't just the whispers, the shadows, or the unexplainable events. It was the sheer, overwhelming presence of something beyond life itself. Something that defied reason. As the UNS Deliverance neared its destination, K. Wraith barely slept. He heard them now, the silent passengers. Not speaking, not threatening, but simply there. Their presence was undeniable. Every flicker of the lights, every distant sound, every shift in the air carried the weight of their existence. And the humans? They had accepted it long ago. To them, this was normal. The war never truly ended, and their fallen comrades never truly left. When the ship finally docked, K. Wraith stepped off with unsteady legs. He looked back at the towering structure one last time, and for a fleeting moment he saw them. Figures standing in the dim corridors, watching, unseen yet ever present. His breath caught in his throat. The humans fought wars with the living, but they were never alone. From that day forward, K. Wraith understood the truth. The galaxy feared human ships not because of their firepower or their technology, but because of what lingered inside them. To step aboard a human vessel was to walk among the dead. And no alien was ever truly prepared for that. The moment K. Wraith stepped onto the UNS Deliverance, he felt it, a heavy presence in the air, something unseen pressing against him like an invisible force. The cold metal floor beneath his feet hummed with the power of the warship, yet it was not the usual hum of technology. It felt deeper, older, something beyond the simple workings of machines. The Exilvani diplomat had been inside many starships before, from the elegant, sleek vessels of his own people to the advanced crafts of the Jorath and the heavily armored dreadnoughts of the Vokrin. But nothing felt like this. The corridors of the human ship were dim, lined with reinforced plating that bore marks of past battles, scorch marks, dents, and long, jagged scratches that looked as if something had tried to claw its way out. He dismissed the thought as his mind playing tricks, but the unease did not leave him. The human crew moved with an efficiency that should have been reassuring, but there was something in their posture, in the way they avoided lingering in certain hallways, that unsettled him. They seemed aware of something he was not. Commander Graves greeted him with a nod, his expression unreadable. "Ambassador K. Wraith, I trust you will find our accommodations adequate," he said, leading him through the corridors. The diplomat forced himself to focus, pushing aside his discomfort. "Your ship is different," K. Wraith said, carefully choosing his words. Graves glanced at him, a slight, knowing smile on his face. "You'll get used to it." But there was something in his tone, something that suggested K. Wraith would not want to. The tour was brief. The human ship was not built for luxury. It was a war machine, efficient and functional. His quarters were small but serviceable, yet even there, the air felt thick, charged with something unseen. When the door closed behind him, he released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He was overthinking. It was just a ship. A strange one, yes, but still just a ship. The first few hours of the journey passed uneventfully, but the feeling never faded. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy he could not explain. As he moved through the corridors, he felt watched, though every time he turned, there was nothing but empty hallways. The crew spoke little, their interactions with him polite but distant, as if they were avoiding unnecessary conversation. When he asked about the history of the ship, a young officer hesitated before answering. "She's seen a lot of battles," the officer said. "Some say the ship remembers." Before K. Wraith could ask what that meant, The officer excused himself and hurried away. That night, K. Wraith found himself unable to sleep. The lights in his quarters flickered slightly, though there was no logical reason for it. The temperature felt colder than before, and the silence was oppressive. Then, just as he was beginning to relax, he heard a faint sound outside his door. A whisper. Not words, just a breath of sound, like something exhaling in the dark. His skin crawled. Slowly, he rose and approached the door, placing a hand against it. The metal felt unnaturally cold. He hesitated before opening it, expecting to see someone there. But the corridor was empty. Only the distant hum of the ship filled the silence. Shaking his head, he stepped back inside, convincing himself it was nothing. Just his imagination. The next day, the whispers continued. Not always loud, not always clear, but always there. Sometimes it was a soft murmuring in the distance. Other times it was right behind him, vanishing the moment he turned. At one point, as he was passing through the engineering sector, he saw movement from the corner of his eye, a figure standing at the end of the corridor. When he turned to look, there was nothing. Yet the air was thick with something unseen, something heavy. The human crew continued to act normal, but now K. Wraith saw it, they were ignoring it. They were pretending it wasn't happening. Later, he gathered his courage and approached one of the engineers, an older human named Morales. Your ship, K. Wraith said, lowering his voice. There's something wrong with it. Morales looked at him for a long moment before sighing. You're not the first to say that, he admitted. But nothing's wrong. It's just the way things are. Karath narrowed his eyes. Explain. The engineer hesitated, as if debating whether he should speak. Finally, he said, You ever hear of battlefield echoes? Karath shook his head. Humans have a saying, a place remembers what happens to it. This ship, it's seen war. Too much war. And when a place sees enough death, sometimes something lingers. K. Wraith stiffened. You mean ghosts? The word felt strange in his mouth. The concept of spirits was known to the Exilvani, but it was nothing more than ancient superstition. The engineer gave a small, grim smile. Call it whatever you want. But the UNS Deliverance isn't empty. It never has been. Before K. Wraith could ask anything more, a sudden clanging sound echoed through the corridor, metal striking metal, distant but loud. The crew barely reacted. Morales simply sighed. It's starting early this time, he muttered, before walking away. That night, K. Wraith saw it with his own eyes. As he walked back to his quarters, he passed a crew member, a human technician, young, focused on a datapad. But as K. Wraith stepped aside to let him pass, he noticed something. A second figure walking beside him. Tall, featureless, a shadow that moved without sound. Wraith's breath caught in his throat. He turned sharply, but the shadow was gone. The technician continued walking, oblivious to what had just happened. Panic crept into K. Wraith's mind. He hurried to his quarters, locking the door behind him. He didn't believe in spirits. He didn't believe in curses. But what he had just seen defied every logical explanation. The ship was alive with something unnatural, something he could not explain. The whispers grew louder that night. This time, they weren't just noises. He heard voices, fragments of words, echoes of screams. He pressed his hands to his ears, willing them to stop, but they did not. Then, in the reflection of the small metal panel across the room, he saw a figure standing behind him. A dark silhouette, unmoving. His breath stopped. Slowly, he turned, but there was nothing there. Only the cold air pressing against him. He barely slept. When morning came, he found himself staring at his own reflection, his eyes sunken, his nerves frayed. The ship continued on its course, the crew unbothered, but K. Wraith now understood why no alien ever boarded a human warship twice. The horror was not in the battles it had fought, nor in the weapons it carried. The horror was in what it remembered. The UNS Deliverance was not just a ship. It was a graveyard, a place where the past refused to die. And now, K. Wraith was part of it. The moment K. Wraith stepped onto the UNS Deliverance, he felt it. A strange heaviness in the air, something unseen pressing against him, making the artificial lighting seem dimmer than it should be. The Exovani ambassador had been inside many alien ships, but this one was different. Human ships always had a reputation, massive, war-scarred, built for destruction, but that wasn't what unsettled him. It was the silence. The corridors stretched ahead, metallic walls dull and lifeless, but there was something else, something he couldn't quite define. An invisible presence, watching, waiting. The crew moved with efficiency, their expressions neutral, their gazes avoiding the darker corners of the ship. They acted as if nothing was wrong. And yet, they never walked alone. Commander Graves met him at the docking bay, his face calm but unreadable. "Ambassador K. Wraith, welcome aboard," he said, his voice steady. "I trust the journey will be smooth." K. Wraith studied the man, searching for some hint of what he... The ship departed smoothly, engines roaring as the vast blackness of space swallowed them. Wraith settled into his quarters, a small, functional space with nothing unnecessary. But the silence in the room was too deep, too unnatural. The walls seemed to breathe, the hum of the ship carrying something more than just mechanical vibrations. He turned sharply, his mind playing tricks on him, convinced he saw movement in the reflection of the metallic surface of the desk. But when he looked again, there was nothing. The first night, K. Wraith slept poorly. A faint sound drifted through the walls, just on the edge of hearing. Whispers. Not words, just the soft murmur of voices. At first, he dismissed it as the crew moving through the halls, but the more he listened, the more he realized they weren't speaking to each other. He sat up in bed, his breath shallow. The sound didn't come from the corridors. It was closer, inside the walls. A chill ran down his spine. For hours, he sat there, listening, unwilling to move, unwilling to acknowledge what his instincts screamed at him. It was only exhaustion that eventually dragged him into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, the crew continued their duties as if nothing had happened. He studied them more carefully now, noticing the way they moved. They never paused too long in any one place. They never turned their heads too quickly. They never looked over their shoulders. Later that day, he found himself walking through one of the lower decks, an area meant for storage and maintenance. The corridors stretched endlessly, dimly lit, filled with the soft hum of machinery. He turned a corner and froze. A crew member stood a few feet ahead, motionless. Wraith recognized him, a technician he had seen earlier, a man with sharp features and tired eyes. The man's back was to him, his posture rigid, unmoving. "Are you all right?" K. Wraith asked cautiously. The technician did not respond. K. Wraith took a hesitant step forward, but the moment he did, the man turned sharply and walked away, disappearing around the corner without a single word. Something about the way he moved sent a deep unease through K. Wraith. He rushed forward, turning the corner, but the hallway was empty. The technician was gone, vanished in a place with no exits. Wraith stood there, his pulse loud in his ears. Something was wrong with this ship. That night, the whispers returned. Louder, more distinct. He heard footsteps when no one was there, the shuffle of movement just beyond sight. When he passed reflective surfaces, he swore he saw shadows that didn't belong to him. His mind screamed for logical explanations, but logic held no power in this place. On the third day, he confronted Graves. "What is this ship?" he demanded. "What's inside it?" The commander studied him for a long moment before answering. "Passengers," he said finally. K. Wraith frowned. "Your crew?" Graves shook his head. "No. The ones who never left." The word sent a chill through K. Wraith. "Explain." Graves leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. "Human ships don't just carry soldiers. They carry memories. This ship has seen war, death, too much of it. And sometimes, death doesn't leave." K. Wraith's mind recoiled at the implication. "You mean ghosts?" Graves exhaled slowly. "Call them what you want. They were part of us once. They still are." The idea was absurd. Spirits, remnants of the dead, it was nothing more than ancient superstition. And yet, he had seen the technician vanish. He had heard the whispers. He had felt the cold weight of unseen eyes on him. That night, the truth revealed itself. Wrath had been walking back to his quarters when he heard it. A soft voice, barely a whisper, his name. He turned sharply, his breath caught in his throat. The corridor was empty, but then from the corner of his vision, he saw a shadow standing at the far end of the hallway. A humanoid figure, unmoving. Wraith's heart pounded. He forced himself to step forward, blinking to clear his vision. The figure was closer. A strangled breath escaped his lips. He hadn't seen it move, hadn't heard a single sound, yet now it stood only a few meters away. The air around it seemed wrong, as if the space itself rejected its presence. Wraith turned and ran, his rational mind abandoning him. He didn't stop until he was inside his quarters, locking the door, his chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. The lights flickered. The whispers swelled. Then, from behind him, a voice low, broken, almost human. "You don't belong here." Wraith spun around. The room was empty. His mind screamed at him to leave, to find a way off the ship, but there was nowhere to go. The journey wasn't over. He was trapped with them, the silent passengers. And now, they knew he could see them. The rest of the voyage was a waking nightmare. The whispers never stopped. Shadows loomed at the edges of his vision. The crew continued their duties, ignoring the unseen, refusing to acknowledge what lurked among them. The dead did not rest here. They walked the halls, watching, waiting. When the ship finally docked, Wraith was the first to leave. He stepped onto solid ground with shaking legs, the artificial sunlight of the station a harsh contrast to the dim horror he had endured. He turned back one last time, staring at the massive vessel behind him. Through one of the dark windows, he swore he saw a figure standing there, watching him. A cold realization settled in his mind. The UNS Deliverance was not just a warship. It was a tomb, and its dead never traveled alone. The air inside the command chamber was tense. Captain Elias stood with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the large display screen in front of him. The mission was simple, an exploration assignment on an uncharted planet, designated PX-17. On the surface, it seemed like any other barren world, but there were whispers among the crew, rumors of strange readings and anomalies that defied explanation. Elias wasn't one to entertain superstition, but deep down, even he felt an unspoken dread about what lay ahead. The UNS Valor had been in orbit for hours, scanning the surface for any sign of danger, but the readings remained inconclusive. The planet's atmosphere was breathable, yet there were strange energy fluctuations that made the scanners unreliable. Elias finally turned to his team. "We're sending down a crew. Volunteers only," he said. His voice was steady, but the weight of the mission hung heavy in the air. Silence stretched for a few moments before three officers stepped forward. Lieutenant Ramirez, a seasoned scout with nerves of steel. Corporal Hayes, the youngest but known for his fearlessness. And finally, Dr. Lin, the mission's xenobiologist, whose curiosity outweighed her fear. Elias nodded. "Good. You depart in 10 minutes." The shuttle descended through the thick atmosphere, turbulence shaking the craft as it neared the planet's surface. The landscape that greeted them was lifeless, endless stretches of gray rock, towering cliffs, and a sky that pulsed with eerie shades of blue and green. The moment the shuttle landed, an unnatural silence fell over them. No wind, no movement, no sound beyond their own breathing. It was as if the planet itself was waiting. Hayes was the first to step out, his boots crunching against the dry, cracked ground. "Feels dead," he muttered, gripping his weapon a little tighter. Ramirez checked his scanner, frowning at the fluctuating readings. "Something's interfering with the signal," he said. "We should stick close." Lynn knelt by the ground, running her gloved fingers over the surface. "This rock," she whispered. "It's not natural." Before they could question further, a loud thud echoed through the air. They spun around, weapons raised. But there was nothing. Just the desolate landscape stretching endlessly. "Did you hear that?" Hayes asked, his voice uneasy. Another thud. Closer. The ground trembled slightly beneath them. Ramirez activated his communicator. "Captain, we might have company." But only static answered him. Then came the whispers. Faint at first, like wind moving through unseen corridors, but growing louder, forming words they couldn't understand. Lin's breath hitched. "We need to go back." But before they could move, the ground beneath them collapsed. Darkness swallowed them as they fell, the world above vanishing in an instant. They landed hard, the impact knocking the air from their lungs. Dust and debris filled the air, making it hard to see. Ramirez groaned, clutching his shoulder. "Everyone all right?" Hayes coughed, struggling to his feet. "What the hell just happened?" They were in a massive underground chamber, its walls lined with strange carvings, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. Lynn stared in awe. "This isn't a natural cave," she whispered. "Someone built this." The whispers returned. But this time, they weren't distant. They were all around them. A figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, humanoid, but wrong. Its body was shrouded in darkness, its face hidden beneath a mask that seemed carved from bone. It stood motionless, watching them. Hayes raised his weapon. "Stay back." The figure tilted its head slightly. Then, without warning, more of them appeared shifting out of the darkness like ghosts. Surrounding them. Silent. Unmoving. "Orders, Lieutenant?" Elias' voice crackled through their. The moment she spoke, the figures moved. Fast. Everything became a blur of shadows and chaos. The creatures didn't attack, but they pushed, forcing them to react, to fight, to face the unknown. Ramirez fired, but the bullets passed through empty air. Hayes swung his weapon, but his hand met nothing. The figures were illusions, echoes of something beyond their understanding. Lynn fell to her knees, gripping her head. "It's not real." "It's not real then." As suddenly as it began, the figures vanished. Silence. But in their minds, the meaning was clear. You have been tested. You have been judged. And you have passed. The ground trembled again. The walls shifted. And before they could react, they were lifted, pulled upward by an unseen force, back to the surface, where their shuttle waited as if nothing had happened. Ramirez looked around, breathing heavily. What the hell was that? Lynn exhaled shakily. A warning. A lesson. She turned to the sky, feeling the weight of something greater than them pressing against her mind. This planet, it's not empty. It never was. As they boarded the shuttle, Elias's voice came through the comms, urgent and demanding answers. But none of them could explain what had happened. They only knew one thing: PX-17 was watching, and whatever ruled, it had deemed them worthy to leave. For now. The bridge of the UNS Odyssey was silent, save for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Captain Alden stood near the main viewport, his eyes fixed on the distant, dying star that had brought them here. The system had no name, no recorded history, just a set of coordinates buried deep within an old human archive. An anomaly, a forgotten place. But something about it called to them. Something that even the most advanced scanners couldn't explain. Lieutenant Carter shifted uneasily at the console. Captain, long-range sensors are still picking up strange energy signatures, but I can't make sense of them. It's like the readings are shifting. Alden nodded, his gaze never leaving the void. Then we go in. The ship advanced, pushing deeper into the uncharted space. The dying star pulsed with an unnatural glow, its flickering light casting eerie shadows across the ship's metallic walls. As they neared, the energy readings grew stronger, erratic, almost as if something was responding to their presence. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the weight of something unseen pressing against them. Then, without warning, the ship lurched. The lights flickered, alarms blaring as the Odyssey trembled like a living thing in pain. "Report!" Alden barked. Carter's fingers danced across the controls. "Something's pulling us in. It's not gravity, it's something else." The view screen distorted, colors bleeding into one another as space itself seemed to twist around them. And then darkness. The ship stopped shaking. The alarms fell silent. The crew held their breath. When the view screen cleared, the sight before them sent a chill through their bones. A structure, floating in the void. Massive. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a colossal construct of metal and stone, ancient beyond measure. Its surface pulsed with strange lights, shifting and flickering like a dying heartbeat. It was not natural. It was not abandoned. And yet, it had been waiting. Alden's voice was barely above a whisper. "What in God's name?" Carter swallowed hard. "Captain, there's something else." He hesitated, as if afraid to say it out loud. "We're receiving a signal." "It's in our language." Silence. The crew exchanged nervous glances. No human had ever been here. No human could have sent that signal. "Put it through," Alden ordered. A moment later, a voice filled the bridge. Calm. Hollow. Familiar. "You should not have come." The words sent a shiver through them. It was not a warning. It was a statement. Alden straightened, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Identify yourself." No response. Just a low, pulsing hum vibrating through the ship's walls. The construct loomed ahead, its presence growing heavier, as if it was watching them. Carter's hands trembled slightly over the console. "Sir, we're detecting an entrance, some kind of docking port." Alden exhaled slowly. They had come too far to turn back now. "Prepare a landing team." Minutes later, Alden, Carter, and 2 security officers stepped into the airlock. The docking sequence engaged, and a dull thunk echoed through the ship as the Odyssey latched onto the massive construct. The doors slid open, revealing a corridor older than human history. The walls were lined with strange symbols, pulsing faintly with an unseen energy. The air was still heavy, as if time itself had been frozen within these walls. The moment they stepped inside, a deep resonance filled their bones, a presence, unseen but undeniable. Carter whispered, "I don't like this, sir." Alden pressed forward, his footsteps echoing through the emptiness. The deeper they went, the stronger the presence became. The ship's lights cast long, unnatural shadows, and for a brief moment, Alden swore he saw movement in the corner of his vision. Then they reached it. A chamber. Massive. At its center stood an object, a monolith, smooth and black, pulsing with light. Around it, floating in midair, were hundreds of symbols, shifting and rearranging in ways that defied logic. Carter scanned the structure. "This is technology beyond anything we know." As he spoke, the monolith reacted. The lights brightened. The symbols moved faster. And then the voice returned. "You were not meant to awaken this." The words echoed in their minds, more than just sound, a presence pressing into their thoughts. Alden gritted his teeth, forcing himself to remain standing as images flooded his mind. Memories, not his own. A war. A species long forgotten. A secret buried in the depths of space. And then the truth. This place was not a relic. It was not a ruin. It was a prison. Alden staggered back, his breath shallow. The monolith pulsed, the light growing more intense. The symbols rearranged themselves, forming words in their own language. ITISSTILHERE. A deep rumble shook the chamber. The walls trembled. The presence they had felt since entering shifted. And then they understood. Something was waking up. "Back to the ship. Now." Alden ordered, his voice sharp. They ran, the corridor stretching endlessly before them. The walls pulsed as if alive, the construct reacting to their presence. The Odyssey's airlock was just ahead, the doors still open. They rushed inside, slamming the controls. The moment the doors sealed, the entire ship trembled. "Get us out of here!" Alden shouted. The engines roared, the ship pulling away just as the construct began to change. The monolith's light flared, its energy surging outward. The ancient prison had been disturbed. The Odyssey shot into space, escaping just as the construct collapsed into itself, disappearing. The silence that followed was deafening. The crew sat in stunned horror, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. Alden exhaled shakily, turning back to the view screen. The construct was gone, but something told him it was not destroyed. They had come seeking knowledge. They had found something older than time, something that had been locked away for a reason. And now it was free.